Saving Home. Chapter 3. Kate stared at her reflection in the elevator doors as they climbed toward the 15th floor. The mirrored surface showed a woman who looked like she'd stepped from the pages of a medical journal. Tailored navy dress, blonde hair smoothed into submission, makeup applied with surgical precision. Not a woman who'd spent 20 minutes debating whether to cancel. The elevator dinged. 15th floor. She'd agreed to this dinner because Dr. Vance had cornered her in the physician's lounge with the tactical precision of a smart bomb. Patricia, head of emergency medicine and Kate's closest approximation to a friend, had presented the setup with clinical efficiency. Todd Spencer, Washington lobbyist, Harvard Law, successful by any metric that matters. The kind of man who moved in the same circles as hospital board members and research grant committees. You need a social life, Patricia had said, not looking up from her chart notes. And before you argue, eating peanut butter alone while binge-watching medical documentaries doesn't count. Kate had wanted to protest that she didn't binge-watch anything, that she selected educational programming with deliberate intent. But Patricia's point stood. Kate's last date had been 8 months ago with a cardiothoracic surgeon who'd spent the entire evening discussing his publication record. The restaurant Todd had chosen sat in the heart of Georgetown, the kind of establishment where senators conducted business over $30 steaks and $100 bottles of wine. Kate approached the hostess stand, noting the way conversations paused as she passed. She'd learned to ignore the looks, some appreciative, others calculating, all measuring her against whatever expectations they carried. Dr. McCormick? Your party is already seated. The hostess led her through a maze of white tablecloths and crystal stemware to a corner table, where a man in his mid-40s rose to greet her. Todd Spencer looked exactly as Patricia had described, tall, broad-shouldered, silver threading through dark hair in a way that suggested distinguished rather than aging. Catherine. He extended his hand, his grip firm and possessive. Patricia said you were beautiful, but she undersold the reality. Kate settled into her chair, noting how he'd used her full name despite her introduction. Patricia has a tendency toward hyperbole. Todd signaled the sommelier with a practiced gesture. I took the liberty of ordering wine. The 2015 Barolo? It pairs beautifully with their ribeye. I don't drink. Ah! His smile faltered for a microsecond. Religious reasons? Personal preference. The sommelier arrived, began his elaborate presentation of the wine bottle. Todd waved him away with visible irritation. Sparkling water for the lady. Make it Pellegrino. Kate watched the interaction, filing away the casual dismissal, the assumption that she couldn't speak for herself. Red flags began unfurling in her peripheral vision. So, Todd leaned back, his confidence reassembling itself. Patricia tells me you're the trauma surgeon everyone's afraid of at George Washington. I'm not sure that's how I'd phrase it. Come on. The machine of the ER? I heard you once performed a thoracotomy in an elevator during a power outage. The elevator wasn't moving. It was the most sterile environment available. Todd laughed, the sound carrying across nearby tables. See? That's exactly the kind of precision I admire. In my line of work, details matter. One misplaced comma can kill a bill. And in mine, one misplaced suture can kill a patient. Exactly. We're both perfectionists. He leaned forward, lowering his voice conspiratorially. I have to say, it's refreshing to meet a woman who understands pressure. Most of the women in this city are either social climbers or trust fund babies, playing at careers. Kate's water arrived. She took a careful sip, using the moment to study Todd's face. Handsome, certainly. Successful, obviously. But something in his eyes reminded her of the senior residents who believed their degrees entitled them to deference. Tell me about your work, she said. Todd's expression brightened. For the next 20 minutes, he outlined his client roster with the enthusiasm of a collector displaying rare coins. Defense contractors, pharmaceutical companies, and energy lobbies. He spoke of million-dollar deals and closed-door meetings as if they were romantic adventures. The amendment almost died in committee, he said, cutting into his steak. 3 months of work. Gone. But I pulled some strings, called in favors. The bill passed by 2 votes. What did the amendment do? Streamlined environmental review processes for critical infrastructure project. It saved my clients about 18 months of regulatory red tape. Kate nodded politely, though something cold settled in her stomach. She'd treated patients affected by industrial accidents, had seen what happened when safety regulations became inconvenient obstacles. Of course, Todd continued, the environmental groups went crazy. They act like every project is going to poison the water supply. They don't understand that progress requires pragmatism. And if the water supply actually gets poisoned? Todd paused mid-chew. That's why we have the EPA. Though frankly, they're often part of the problem rather than the solution. The conversation continued along predictable lines. Todd name-dropped senators and cabinet members. described restaurant meetings and golf course negotiations. He ordered another glass of wine, then another. With each drink, his voice grew louder, and his gestures expansive. Kate found herself mentally cataloging symptoms. Flushed cheeks, slight slur to his words, and his confident posture giving way to something looser, more aggressive. She'd grown up reading these signs, and had learned to recognize the moment when alcohol transformed her father from merely absent to dangerous. The thing about this city, Todd said, is that everyone thinks they have principles until they need something done. I had one senator, won't name names, who spent 6 months railing against corporate influence. Then his district needed a new highway, and suddenly I was his best friend. Kate checked her watch. They'd been here 2 hours. Her smile felt like a mask that no longer fit properly. You're very quiet tonight, Todd observed. I hope I'm not boring you with shop talk. Not at all. Your work sounds influential. Influential. He leaned back, swirling his wine. I like that. Most people say powerful, but influential is more accurate. I don't make policy, I shape it. There is a subtle difference. The sommelier appeared again. Todd ordered a 4th glass, despite Kate's obvious discomfort. She'd watched him transform from charming to self-aggrandizing, to something that made her skin crawl. You know what I love about you, Catherine? Todd's voice had taken on an edge, his earlier polish wearing thin. You're not trying to impress me. Most women spend the whole dinner talking about their yoga classes or their book clubs. You just sit there, listening. Very restful. Kate's jaw tightened. Perhaps because you haven't asked me any questions. What? About my work. My interests. You've been talking for 2 hours, but you haven't asked me a single question about myself. Todd blinked, processing this information. Well, Patricia told me all about your career. Very impressive. Youngest department head in George Washington's history. That's not accurate. I'm not a department head. Right. Trauma surgery. Still, very impressive for a woman. The qualifier hung in the air like a surgical blade. Kate felt her control slipping, the careful mask of professionalism beginning to crack. I think we should call it a night. Todd checked his Rolex with exaggerated surprise. It's only 9:30. The night's young. He signaled the waiter. Let's get dessert. They have an excellent tiramisu. I have early surgery tomorrow. Come on! Live a little. His hand shot across the table, fingers closing around her wrist. You're wound too tight, Catherine. All work and no play. Kate stared at his hand until he released her. I prefer Kate, and I'm fine exactly as I am. Kate. He tested the name like he was tasting wine. See? Already more relaxed. The waiter approached with the check. Todd grabbed it before Kate could speak, making a show of examining the total. $62 bottle of wine. Highway robbery, but that's what you pay for ambiance, right? He dropped a black American Express card on the leather folder, without looking at the bill's details. Kate reached for her purse, but Todd waved her away. Please. I insist. It's not every day I get to have dinner with GW's finest. 20 minutes later, they stood on the sidewalk outside the restaurant. The August heat had broken while they'd been inside, replaced by the humid promise of a storm. Lightning flickered in the distance, still silent. My car's at the valet, Todd said. I'll drive you home. I have my own car. I'm not letting you drive alone at night. Not in this city. His tone carried the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. Kate's Audi sat in the valet line, keys already in the attendant's hand. Todd tipped the young man, then moved to Kate's passenger door. I can manage, Kate said. Come on. I'm a gentleman. I see my dates safely home. Something in the way he said my dates made Kate's stomach tighten. But the valet was watching, and Todd had positioned himself so that arguing would create a scene. She unlocked the car. Todd folded himself into the passenger seat, immediately adjusting the air conditioning and radio without asking. Kate drove in silence, hyper-aware of his presence in her personal space. He'd switched colognes at some point during dinner, or perhaps the alcohol had intensified the scent. It filled the car's interior, overwhelming and cloying. Nice car, he said, running his hands over the leather interior. Audi makes a statement. Says you're successful but not flashy. I drive a Tesla myself. Environmental responsibility, you know. Kate navigated the traffic on Wisconsin Avenue, grateful for something to focus on besides Todd's continuing monologue. He'd moved on to discussing his apartment in DuPont Circle, his weekend house in the Hamptons, his investment portfolio. The Watergate rose before them, its distinctive architecture lit against the storm clouds. Todd whistled appreciatively. Now this is impressive. What floor? You don't need to walk me up. The building has excellent security. I insist. My mother raised me to be a gentleman. Kate pulled into the garage, her jaw aching from clenched teeth. She'd spent the entire drive calculating exit strategies, backup plans, and ways to end this evening without incident, but Todd had already unbuckled his seatbelt, was stepping out of the car with the confidence of someone who'd never heard the word no. The elevator ride to the 15th floor lasted forever. Todd stood too close, his hand resting on the small of her back in a gesture that felt possessive rather than polite. Kate counted floors, measured breathing, prepared herself for what would undoubtedly be an awkward goodbye. They stopped outside her apartment door. Kate turned, key in hand, her smile professional and final. "Thank you for dinner, Todd. I can manage from here. Aren't you going to invite me in for coffee? It's late, and I have surgery at 6. Todd's expression shifted, the charming mask slipping to reveal something harder underneath. "Coffee doesn't take long. I don't drink coffee after 8. Caffeine interferes with sleep. Then we don't have to drink it." The implication hung between. Kate kept her voice level, clinical. "Good night, Todd." She turned toward her door, but his hand closed around her upper arm. "Wait." Kate looked down at his fingers, then back at his face. "Remove your hand." "Catherine, Kate, come on. We had a nice dinner. I paid for a $60 bottle of wine. The least you can do is invite me in. The least I can do is thank you, which I already did." His grip tightened. "You're being unreasonable. I'm being clear. Thank you for dinner. Good night." She tried to turn again, but Todd stepped closer, backing her against the door. His breath smelled like wine, and something sour underneath. "Look, I don't know what game you're playing, but I'm not interested in the chase. I'm a successful man. I have options. Then exercise them somewhere else." Todd's other hand slammed against the door beside her head, making her flinch. The sound echoed through the hallway like a gunshot. "You think you're better than me? Some robot surgeon who's too good for normal human contact?" Kate's training kicked in. She cataloged exits, weapons, and pressure points, but Todd was bigger, stronger, and blocking her path to the elevator. "I paid for dinner," he said, his voice dropping to a whisper that was more threatening than shouting. "I was charming. I was patient. You owe me something?" "I owe you nothing." Wrong answer. His forearm pressed against her throat, pinning her to the door. Kate's vision flickered at the edges, her airway partially blocked. She tried to speak, to breathe, but Todd was leaning his full weight against her. "You're going to invite me in," he said. "You're going to pour me a real drink, and then you're going to show me why Patricia thinks you're so special." Kate clawed at his arm, but he was too strong. The hallway spun around her, oxygen deprivation making everything feel distant and unreal. She thought of her parents, of all the nights she'd hidden in her room while they fought, while glass shattered and voices escalated into violence. Then suddenly she could breathe. Todd was gone, pulled backward by something invisible. Kate collapsed against her door, gasping, her hand instinctively going to her throat. "You okay?" The voice was calm, controlled. Kate looked up to see a man in a gray t-shirt and jeans crouched beside her. He had dark hair, brown eyes, and the kind of steady presence that made everything else feel less chaotic. "Ma'am? Can you breathe?" Kate nodded, still catching her breath. Behind him, Todd was face down on the hallway carpet, his arm twisted behind his back in what looked like a professional restraint hold. "Someone called the police," the man said without taking his eyes off Kate. "Building security, too." Todd struggled, cursing into the carpet. "This is assault. I'm a lawyer. I'll sue everyone in this goddamn building." "You're a lawyer who just committed assault in front of witnesses," the man replied evenly. "I'd suggest staying quiet until the professionals arrive." Kate tried to stand, her legs shaky. The man, her neighbor she realized, moved to help her without being asked. "Easy. Take your time." His hands were gentle but sure, the kind of hands that were used to handling fragile things under pressure. Kate found herself trusting him completely, which should have been alarming, but somehow wasn't. "I'm Joe," he said. "I live across the hall. Are you hurt?" Kate shook her head, though her throat ached where Todd's arm had pressed. "I'm fine." "You're not fine. But you're safe now." 2 security guards emerged from the elevator, followed quickly by a pair of Metropolitan Police officers. Joe gave his statement with the same calm precision he'd used to restrain Todd, his voice never rising above conversational level. Todd, now handcuffed and considerably less aggressive, demanded his lawyer and threatened lawsuits with diminishing conviction. The police led him away, his expensive shoes squeaking against the polished floor. "Ma'am?" One of the officers approached Kate. "We'll need your statement." Kate nodded, her professional composure reassembling itself. She answered their questions, describing events like she was dictating surgical notes, but her hand shook as she signed the paperwork. When the police left, Kate and Joe stood alone in the hallway. The silence felt enormous after the chaos of the last hour. "Thank you," Kate said. "Don't mention it." "No, really. If you hadn't." "I did. That's what matters." Kate studied his face. noting the way he avoided taking credit, how he'd positioned himself to give her space while still staying close enough to help if needed. Everything about him suggested competence without arrogance, strength without aggression. "How did you know?" she asked. "I heard the yelling and looked through the peephole." He shrugged. The rest was pretty obvious. Kate's legs felt unsteady again. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving her drained and slightly nauseous. Joe noticed immediately. "Come on, you shouldn't be alone right now." He guided her to his door. Kate should have protested, should have insisted she was fine. Instead, she found herself following him inside, trusting this stranger who'd appeared when she needed him most.